HOA locked my gate. Then the sheriff opened the truth. I drove back to my ranch expecting dust, fences, and silence. But instead, I found a steel gate and 2 guards telling me I didn't have access anymore. My land, my road. And somehow I was the one being turned away. I didn't argue. I just stood there. Because something didn't add up, and I knew if I stayed quiet long enough, the truth would show itself. If you want to see how this unfolds, stick with me, and consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. I knew something was off before I even killed the engine. It wasn't the dust. That was still there, drifting low across the road like it always did this time of year. It wasn't the fence line either. Same old cedar posts, same sag in the wire near the bend where the ground dipped. Nothing looked broken. But something felt tighter, like the land had been holding its breath. I rolled my truck forward another 10 yards, and that's when I saw it. A steel gate. Not rusted, not old, not something that had been there long enough to belong. This thing was new. Clean welds, thick posts driven deep, painted black like it had something to prove. It cut across my access road like a sentence someone had already decided I deserved. I let the truck idle, didn't step out right away, just sat there with both hands resting on the wheel, staring at a gate that hadn't existed the last time I drove through, on my land, or at least the only road that led to it. 2 men stood beside it. They weren't ranch hands. You can tell that in a second. Too clean. Boots without dust, jeans without wear. One of them had a radio clipped to his belt. The other leaned against the post like he'd been told to look relaxed, but didn't quite know how. Security. That's what they were trying to look like. I opened the door and stepped out slow, boots hitting gravel that hadn't changed in 50 years. The engine ticked behind me as it cooled, the only familiar sound in a moment that didn't belong. Neither of them moved until I got within 10 feet. "Can I help you, sir?" the one with the radio asked. His tone was practiced, polite but not friendly. The kind of voice you use when you've already decided the answer doesn't matter. I stopped at the gate, looked past them, down the road that ran straight through the pasture and up toward the ridge where my ranch sat quiet and waiting. I could see the outline of the barn in the distance. Same place it had been my whole life. Still mine. At least it was supposed to be. "Yeah," I said finally. "You can open that gate." The second guy shifted his weight, glanced at the first. Radio man didn't smile. "I'm afraid I can't do that." I let that sit for a second. Not because I didn't understand what he said, but because I wanted to hear it again. Make sure it sounded as wrong the second time as it did the first. "Why not?" I asked. He nodded toward a small metal sign bolted to the post. I hadn't noticed it at first. Private access. Sage Hollow Estates. HOA authorized entry only. I read it once, then again. Let the words settle in like dust in my throat. "That road," he said, following my gaze, "is now restricted. HOA managed access point." I looked back at him. "Now?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, "If you're not a registered resident or authorized personnel, I'm going to have to ask you to turn around." For a moment, I thought maybe this was a mistake. Wrong road, wrong property. Some paperwork mix-up that would take 10 minutes and a phone call to straighten out. But then I looked at the hinges. Brand new. Posts sunk deep. Lock already in place. This wasn't confusion. This was intent. "You know whose land that road leads to?" I asked. The second guy spoke up this time. "We've been told everything past this point falls under Sage Hollow jurisdiction." "Told by who?" Another glance between them. Radio man shifted his stance, just enough to show he wasn't interested in explaining. "I don't make those decisions, sir. I just enforce access. I nodded once, not because I agreed, because I understood. They weren't the problem. They were just standing where the problem had been placed. I stepped closer to the gate, close enough to see the chain wrapped tight through the latch. Thick, new, meant to hold. I reached out and rested my hand on the metal, still warm from the sun. Didn't shake it. Didn't test it. Just let my fingers sit there. A line. That's all it was. Steel and paint and someone else's assumption that they had the right to put it there. Behind me, my truck idled in the dust. In front of me, my land waited on the other side of something that didn't belong. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that I can't drive through a road that's been part of my family's property longer than you've been alive to." Psst. Radio Man didn't blink. "I'm telling you that access is restricted." I studied his face, looking for doubt. Didn't find any. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a move. Someone had decided to put a gate between me and my land, and they'd done it like it was already settled, like I'd already lost. I stepped back. Not fast, not angry, just enough to put a little distance between me and something that wasn't going to open today. "All right," I said. Both of them seemed surprised by that. People expect a reaction in moments like this. Raised voices, demands, something they can push back against. I didn't give them that. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and started recording. Their posture changed immediately. Radio Man straightened. "Sir, you can't film. I can film anything I want from this side of the gate," I said. Calm. I walked a slow circle, capturing the posts, the chain, the sign, their faces, every detail, every assumption, every piece of something that hadn't existed yesterday. "State your names," I said. Neither of them answered. Didn't matter. I zoomed in on the logo stitched into their shirts. Security contractor. Not county. Not state. Private. That told me enough. I lowered the phone, slipped it back into my pocket, looked past them one more time, out toward the land that had been mine before any of this had a name. "This isn't over," I said. Not a threat, just a fact. Radio Man held my gaze. "We're just doing our job." I nodded. "Yeah," I said. I figured. I turned, walked back to my truck, and climbed in without another word. As I pulled away, I checked the mirror once. They were still standing there. Same posture. Same certainty. Like they believed that gate had always been there. Like the line they were guarding had always belonged to someone else. I drove a mile down the road before I stopped, killed the engine, and sat there in the quiet. No wind, no movement, just the weight of something that didn't add up. You don't block a man from his own land by accident. You don't install a gate, hire guards, print signs, and call it jurisdiction without knowing exactly what you're doing. Which meant one thing. Somewhere, someone had decided they had the authority to redraw a boundary that had been settled decades ago, and they'd done it without asking. I looked down at my hands, still steady, no shake, no rush of anger, just that slow, familiar feeling settling in my chest, the kind that comes when you realize this isn't going to be solved with a conversation. I reached for the glove compartment, pulled out the folder I always kept there. Old paper, thick, edges worn from years of being opened and closed. My grandfather's deed, stamped, filed, recorded long before Sage Hollow had a name to hide behind. I didn't open it yet, just rested my hand on top of it. Then I looked back toward the road, toward that gate. toward the line someone thought they could move, and for the first time since I'd seen it, I asked the only question that mattered. Who gave them the authority? Because whoever it was, they were about to find out exactly where that authority ended. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I turned the truck around and headed back toward that gate, slow this time, deliberate. The kind of pace that tells people you're not reacting, you're measuring. They were still there when I pulled up. Same 2 guards, same posture, but something had shifted. They weren't as relaxed now, not after the filming, not after I'd walked away without giving them the argument they were expecting. I stepped out again. No rush, no raised voice. Just walked back to the gate like it was still mine, because as far as I was concerned, it was. Before either of them could speak, I heard another engine coming up from the opposite sun. Clean, quiet, expensive. A white SUV rolled up behind the gate, gravel crunching like it had permission. The guards straightened instantly. That told me everything I needed to know. The driver's door opened, and Diane Keller stepped out like she owned not just the road, but the air around it. Mid-50s, perfect posture, hair pulled back tight enough to mean business. No dust on her shoes, no hesitation in her step. She didn't look at the guards first. She looked at me. "Mr. Mercer," she said, like we'd already met, and I'd just forgotten. I didn't respond, didn't offer my hand, didn't ask her name. She took that silence in stride. People like her always do. "I'm Diane Keller," she continued, walking up to the gate, "President of Sage Hollow Estates Homeowners Association." I nodded once. "Figured," I said. Her eyes flicked to the deed folder still sitting on my passenger seat, visible through the windshield. Then back to me. "We were hoping to speak with you sooner," she said, "but I understand you've been away." "We?" I asked. She smiled. Small, controlled. The community. I glanced past her SUV toward the cluster of new rooftops I could just barely see over the rise. Sage Hollow. Clean lines, uniform spacing. The kind of place that doesn't happen by accident. Then I looked back at the gate. "This your idea of a welcome?" She didn't flinch. "This," she said, lightly touching the steel post, "is a necessary adjustment." "To what?" "To reality." I let that sit for a second. "Funny," I said. "Reality didn't have a gate here last week." Her smile tightened, just a fraction. "The area has undergone recent jurisdictional clarification," she said. "That access road now falls under HOA management." "Clarification," I repeated. She nodded, like she was explaining something simple to someone who just hadn't caught up yet. "Your property is adjacent to Sage Hollow," she continued. "As development has expanded, certain shared access points required oversight." "Adjacent," I said. "Not included." Her smile came back. "That distinction is currently under review." There it was. Same phrase the guard used. Not a mistake. Scripted. "Under review by who?" I asked. "County planning? Legal consultants? HOA board?" "I didn't sign anything," I cut in. "You inherited a situation," she replied, smooth as glass. "And situations evolve." I took a step closer to the gate. Not aggressive, just enough to remind her where the line actually was. "That road's been tied to my land longer than Sage Hollow's had a name," I said. "You don't just evolve that out of existence." She tilted her head slightly, studying me, like she was recalculating. "Mr. Mercer," she said, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound reasonable, "we're not trying to create conflict. We're trying to create harmony." I almost laughed. "By locking me out of my own property? by ensuring consistent access standards for all residents. I'm not one of your residents. Her pause was brief, but it was there. Not formally, she said. I caught that. Filed it. Meaning what? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward the land beyond the gate. Your ranch sits in the middle of a rapidly developing area, she said. Property values are shifting. Infrastructure is expanding. There are opportunities here, if you're willing to work with us. There it was. Not confusion. Not oversight. Leverage. You're trying to fold my land into your HOA, I said. She smiled again. Integration is a strong word. Accurate, though. Her eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. Then she shifted tone. Softer. More persuasive. We've had discussions with several residents who expressed concerns about access continuity, she said. Emergency vehicles, service routes, long-term planning. So you built a gate, I said. Without asking. We acted in the community's best interest. I nodded slowly. Funny thing about that, I said. My land's not part of your community. Her expression didn't change, but the air did. Tighter now. Less polite. Again, she said, that's under review. I stepped back from the gate, looked at the guards, then back at her. And until that review's done, I said, you're just going to pretend you own the road? She didn't blink. We're going to manage access responsibly, by denying it to the owner. She didn't answer that. Didn't need to. The answer was already sitting in front of me, locked with a chain that didn't belong there. I reached into my pocket again, pulled out my phone. This time I didn't hide it. Started recording. Diane's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. You're documenting this? She asked. Yeah, I said. I am. She folded her hands in front of her, composed. If you intend to pursue legal clarification, she said, I'd advise doing so through proper channels. I plan to. Good. She nodded once like we'd just reached an agreement. In the meantime, she added, this access point remains restricted. I stopped recording, slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I walked right up to the gate again, close enough that we were only a few feet apart. You know what this looks like? I said. She didn't answer. Looks like you've already decided how this ends, I continued. Like I'm just supposed to catch up. Her smile returned, faint, confident. We're simply aligning things with where they're going. I held her gaze. Then you better hope you're right about where that is. For the first time, something in her expression shifted. Not fear, not doubt, just calculation. Like she was realizing I wasn't going to react the way she expected. No shouting, no threats, no mistakes. Just observation. I turned away from the gate, walked back to my truck, opened the door, then paused. One more thing, I said without looking back. Mr. Mercer? She replied. You keep saying under review. A beat. Yeah. Make sure whoever's reviewing it, I said, actually reads the deed. I got in, shut the door, and started the engine. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't need one. As I pulled away, I checked the mirror again. Diane Keller was still standing there. Same posture, same confidence. But now she was watching me differently. Not like a problem. Like a variable. Something she hadn't fully accounted for yet. I drove past the ridge this time. Kept going until the gate disappeared behind the curve. Then I slowed, reached over, picked up the deed folder, and finally opened it. Thick paper. County seal. Recorded lines that hadn't changed in decades. Clear enough that even someone like Diane Keller couldn't pretend they didn't understand it. Which meant one thing. They weren't confused. They were building something. And whatever it was, that gate was just the beginning. By the time I made it back to the house, the first envelope was already waiting. It sat in the mailbox like it belonged there. White, clean, official-looking. No dust on it, no crease from being handled twice. Just my name printed in a font that tried too hard to look legitimate. Cole Mercer. No return address. I didn't open it right away. Just stood there at the end of the drive, holding it between my fingers, feeling the weight of something that hadn't been part of my life yesterday. Then I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet. Violation notice. Unauthorized land use. Non-compliant agricultural activity. Visual impact concerns affecting community standards. I read it once. Then again. Slow. Letting each phrase settle in like it was meant to mean something. It didn't, not legally, but that wasn't the point. This wasn't about being right. This was about pressure. I folded the paper, slid it back into the envelope, and walked up to the house without a word. By the time I reached the porch, I already knew there'd be more. I was right. 3 more envelopes were sitting on the kitchen table. Different dates, same tone, same language dressed up to sound like authority. Zoning inquiry, environmental review, structural compliance. All tied to land that hadn't changed in 50 years. I set them down in a line, didn't throw them out, didn't crumple them. Just stacked them neat, like evidence. Because that's what they were. Not accusations, not yet. Just the beginning of a record someone wanted on file. I poured a cup of coffee, didn't drink it. Instead, I walked to the window that faced south, toward the ridge where Sage Hollow sat just out of sight. That's when I heard it. A faint hum. Low. Mechanical. Not wind. Not insects. I stepped outside, looked up. There it was. Small, black, steady, a drone, hovering just high enough to pretend it wasn't watching. I didn't wave, didn't shout, didn't even move. Just stood there and let it see me seeing it. It lingered for a second longer, then drifted sideways, slow and deliberate, scanning across the pasture toward the barn. Mapping, recording, building something. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and opened a new note. Date, time, drone activity, short, clear. Then I walked to the storage room and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. Trail cameras. Old, but reliable. I set 3 of them out on the table. Checked batteries. Checked memory. Because if they were going to watch me, I was going to watch them better. That afternoon, the second wave came. A county truck rolled up the drive just past noon. White. Official seal on the door. 2 men stepped out, both holding clipboards. Different uniforms this time. Same posture. Mr. Mercer? The taller one asked. I nodded once. We received a report regarding possible water usage irregularities tied to your upper basin, he said. From who? I asked. He didn't answer that. Just flipped a page on his clipboard. We'll need to take a look at your irrigation setup and dam access point. I let that hang. Then I stepped aside. Go ahead, I said. They weren't expecting that. You can tell when people prepare for resistance and don't get it. It throws them. They walked the property like they were supposed to find something. Checked the dam, measured runoff channels, took pictures of structures that hadn't changed since before either of them had a job title. I stayed quiet, watched, logged every step in my head. When they were done, the shorter one closed his folder. Everything appears to be within acceptable limits, he said. Then why are you here? I asked. A pause. Then the taller one answered, Routine follow-up. I nodded. Sure it is. They left without pushing further. Didn't issue a citation. Didn't escalate. But they didn't apologize either, because that wasn't their role. They were just another piece, another layer. By sunset, the pattern was clear. Letters, drones, inspectors, all hitting at once, not random, coordinated. I sat at the kitchen table that night with the deed spread out in front of me, ran my finger along the recorded boundary lines. Every inch accounted for, every access point documented, including that road, especially that road. There was no gray area here, which meant the gray area was being manufactured. I reached for another sheet of paper and started writing. Not emotional, not scattered. Just facts. Date. Time. Event. Violation notice received. Drone observed. County inspection initiated. Each line clean. Each entry precise. Because if they were building a case, I was building one back. Around midnight, the hum came again. This time lower, closer. I didn't rush outside. Didn't grab anything. Just walked to the window and looked out into the dark. The drone hovered near the fence line this time, closer to the road, closer to that gate, like it was checking alignment, testing boundaries, same as before. I watched it for a full minute. Then I stepped outside and turned on the floodlight. The beam cut across the pasture, bright enough to erase shadows. The drone jerked, paused, then pulled back, retreated the same way it came. No hesitation, like it had already gathered what it needed. I stood there for a second longer, then flipped the light off, went back inside, and wrote it down. Because the thing about pressure is, it only works if you react the way they expect. They wanted frustration, mistakes, something they could point to and say, see, he's the problem. I wasn't giving them that. Not yet. Instead, I looked at the stack of notices, the footage I hadn't even pulled yet, the deed that hadn't changed, and I realized something simple. They weren't trying to take my land in one move. They were trying to make it look like it was never fully mine to begin with. And if they could build that story long enough, eventually, someone would believe it. I leaned back in the chair, eyes on the paper in front of me. Then I said it out loud, just to hear it settle. You're building a case, not a question, a fact, which meant I had one job, build a better one. I reached for my keys, stood up, and headed toward the door. Because there was one thing I needed to confirm before this went any further. Not paperwork, not assumptions, truth. And I knew exactly who might have it. Eli Carter, my nearest neighbor, quiet man, keeps to himself, sees more than he says. And if Sage Hollow had been planning something long enough to build a gate overnight, Eli had seen it happen. I stepped outside, got in the truck, and started the engine. As the headlights cut through the dark, I glanced once more toward the south, toward the road, toward that gate, still standing, still locked, still wrong. I shifted into gear, because if they were moving this fast, I was already behind, and I needed to know why. Eli Carter's place sat a mile east of mine, tucked behind a line of cottonwoods that hadn't moved in decades. His porch light was on when I pulled up, same as always. Eli wasn't the kind of man who left things to chance. Not his fences, not his lights, not what he chose to say. He was already outside when I killed the engine, leaning against the railing, arms crossed, like he'd been expecting me. Figured you'd come by, he said. I stepped out, closed the door, and walked up without wasting time. You see that gate? I asked. Eli nodded once. Been watching them build it for 3 days, he said. That stopped me. 3 days? Yeah, I let that settle. 3 days. Concrete set, posts sunk, chain mounted, all while I was gone. All right, I said. Start from the beginning. Eli pushed off the railing and walked down the steps, slow and steady. He didn't talk right away, just looked out toward the south, toward where Sage Hollow sat behind its clean lines and new money. They started bringing trucks in late, he said. After dark. No county markers, no permits posted. Anyone stop them? Eli shook his head. Not my land, he said. And they stayed just close enough to the road to pretend it wasn't yours. I exhaled slowly. They knew what they were doing. They always do, Eli said. We stood there for a second, the quiet between us not empty, but full of things already understood. Then he looked at me. You get the letters yet? I gave a short nod. Drone, too. He gave a dry half smile. Yeah, they've been busy. Why? I asked. Eli didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked back up onto the porch and reached inside the door. When he came back, he was holding a folded sheet of paper. Because of this, he said, handing it over. I opened it. Real estate brochure. Glossy. New print. Sage Hollow Estates. I scanned it once, then slower. Private country living, it said. Exclusive access routes. Integrated natural landscape. Protected views. I flipped the page, and there it was. A map. Clean lines. Subdivision blocks. And a road drawn right through the middle. My road. Labeled like it belonged there. Private HOA access corridor. I didn't say anything, just kept looking. Eli watched me the whole time. They've been handing those out to buyers, he said, showing folks what they're getting. I tapped the page. This right here, I said. This road. They're selling it, Eli finished. I looked up, without owning it. He nodded. People paid for those lots thinking they had guaranteed access through your land, he said. Cleaner drive, better entry, raises the value. I folded the brochure once, then again, slow, measured. So the gate, I said. Isn't about security, Eli replied. It's about control. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. They didn't put that gate up because they think they own the road, I said. Eli shook his head. They put it up because they need everyone else to think they do. I looked back down at the brochure. Everything about it was clean, confident, final, like the decision had already been made, and I wasn't part of it. They've already sold this story, I said. Yeah, Eli said, and now they're trying to make it real. I handed the paper back. He didn't take it. Keep it, he said. You're gonna need it. I slid it into my jacket. Because he was right. That wasn't just a brochure. It was evidence. Intent. Proof they weren't confused. They were committing. I looked out toward the south again. Toward that ridge. Toward the gate I couldn't pass. They've got buyers expecting access, I said, which means they've got money tied to it. Eli nodded. Which means they can't back off now, he added. Exactly. This wasn't a mistake they could fix quietly. This was a position they had to defend, even if it wasn't legal. They're not negotiating, I said. No, Eli replied. They're replacing. The word hung there. Heavy, accurate. They figure if they push hard enough, he continued, paperwork, complaints, pressure, eventually you either fold or get buried in enough trouble that the county steps in. And then? They redraw it for you. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That's why the inspectors came, I said. Yep, the violations. Yep, the drone. Eli gave a short nod. All part of the same thing, he said. Build a narrative. Make it look like your land's a problem. I ran a hand along the porch railing, feeling the rough wood under my fingers. They're trying to turn me into a liability, I said. Exactly. So when they take it, I added, it looks justified. Eli didn't respond. Didn't need to. We both knew that's exactly how it worked. I looked back at him. You see anyone else involved? I asked. He thought for a second. Couple of new faces, he said. Not residents. Suits. Came through twice last week. Met with Keller near the ridge. Investors? Maybe, Eli said. Didn't stick around long enough to hear what they said. But they weren't there to look at houses. I nodded. Filed that. Another layer. Another piece. They move fast, I said. They have to, Eli replied. Because once someone checks the records, they're exposed. Yeah. I looked down at the brochure again in my pocket, then back at him. You told anyone else? I asked. Eli shook his head. Not my fight, he said. Then he paused. But I figured it was about to be yours. I gave a small nod. Yeah, I said. It is. We stood there a moment longer. No noise, no movement, just the understanding that something bigger had already started, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. I turned back toward my truck. Appreciate it, I said. Eli leaned back against the railing again. Just don't wait too long, he added. I stopped, looked over my shoulder. Why's that? He met my eyes. Because they're not building a case anymore, he said. They're finishing one. I nodded once, then got in the truck and started the engine. As I pulled away, the brochure sat heavy in my jacket, not because of what it showed, but because of what it confirmed. They'd already sold something that didn't belong to them, which meant they weren't going to stop at a gate. They were going to take everything that made that road mine and call it theirs. I drove back toward my place, headlights cutting through the dark, mind already moving faster than the road. Because now I knew. This wasn't about access. This was about ownership. And they were trying to erase mine before I could prove it existed. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Because if they thought they were ahead, they hadn't seen what I had yet. And they definitely hadn't seen what I was about to do next. I didn't go to sleep that night. Didn't sit around thinking either. I worked. By the time the sun came up, I had every trail camera from storage mounted and running. 2 along the fence line near the gate. 1 angled toward the road. Another facing the pasture behind the barn. No blind spots. No assumptions. If they were building a case, I was done guessing. I wanted proof, the kind that doesn't argue. The next 2 days stayed quiet. Too quiet. No new letters, no inspectors, no drones. That told me more than if they'd kept pushing. They were waiting, probably thinking I'd react. Push back, make noise, give them something they could use. I didn't. I fed the cattle, checked the fences, logged everything. And I waited. On the 3rd night, just past midnight, the first alert came in. Motion. South fence. I didn't rush outside. Didn't grab a light. I went to the kitchen table, opened the laptop, and pulled the feed. Black and white. Timestamp clear. 2 figures standing just outside the fence line. Not guards. Different build. Different posture. One of them held something long, tripod maybe. The other kept checking over his shoulder like he wasn't supposed to be there. I leaned closer to the screen. They weren't just looking, they were measuring. Laser tool flickered in short bursts against the fence posts. Then one of them stepped forward. Closer. Right up to the wire. I held still. Watched. Because that next step mattered. He looked around once more, then lifted the wire and stepped over. Just like that. No hesitation. No permission. They crossed onto my land. I let the footage run. Didn't interrupt. Didn't move. Because once someone crosses a line like that, you let them finish. They walked about 20 yards in, placing small flags in the ground. Markers, bright tape tied to thin stakes. Temporary, but intentional. The second man followed, pulling something out of a case. Survey equipment. They weren't guessing anymore. They were mapping, redrawing. Right there in my pasture like it was already theirs. I watched every second, recorded everything, every step, every angle, every marker they placed. When they were done, they stepped back over the fence and disappeared into the dark the same way they came. No rush, no panic, like they believed they had the right. I closed the laptop slowly, sat back in the chair, and let the silence settle. Because that was it. That was the shift. This wasn't pressure anymore. This was trespass. Clear, documented, undeniable, and they'd done it without thinking I'd see it. I reached for my notebook and wrote it down. Date, time, entry point, actions. Then I pulled the footage and saved it in 3 places. Local drive, external backup, cloud. No gaps. No chance to lose it. By morning, the flags were still there, standing in my pasture like someone else's version of reality. I walked out to them just after sunrise. Didn't pull them up. Didn't touch them. Just stood there and looked. Each one placed with purpose. Each one marking a line that didn't exist. Then I turned and looked back toward the fence, toward where they crossed. The wire was bent just enough to show it had been lifted. Not broken, not damaged, just used. Like they expected to come back. I pulled out my phone and took photos. Wide shots, close shots, angles that showed exactly where they stepped in and where they walked. Then I turned and walked back to the house. Because I already knew what came next. Not confrontation, not yet, not noise, something else. I picked up the phone, scrolled through my contacts, stopped on one name. Sheriff Tom Hale. I didn't call right away, just stared at it for a second. Because once that call happened, things moved differently, not slower, not faster, just official. I hit dial. It rang twice. Mercer, he said when he picked up. No greeting, no surprise, just my name. You got a minute? I asked. A pause. Then, depends what for. I've got people crossing onto my land, I said. At night, marking boundaries that don't belong to them. Another pause. Longer this time. You sure about that? He asked. I've got it on camera. That changed his tone. All right, he said. I'll come take a look. Today, I'll be there in an hour. I hung up. Didn't feel relief. Didn't feel anything, really. Just a shift. Because now it wasn't just my word against theirs. Now it was record, evidence, law. I walked back outside and stood at the edge of the pasture again, looking at those flags, waiting. Not for them to come back, but for something else, for someone else. Because once the sheriff saw what I saw, this stopped being a private problem and started becoming something they couldn't control anymore. I glanced once more toward the south, toward that gate. Still locked, still standing, still wrong. But now I had proof they'd crossed the line to put it there, and that changed everything. The only question left was, what would the sheriff do when he saw it? Sheriff Tom Hale didn't arrive with lights on, no sirens, no rush, just a county cruiser rolling slow down the gravel like it had nothing to prove. That told me something right away. He wasn't coming in with a conclusion. He was coming to look. I stepped off the porch as he parked, boots crunching against the same ground that hadn't changed, no matter how many people tried to say it had. He got out, adjusted his hat, and gave me a look that said he already knew this wasn't going to be simple. "Cole," he said. "Tom." We didn't shake hands. Didn't need to. "Show me," he said. No small talk, no assumptions, just the work. I led him out to the pasture first, straight to the flags, didn't explain them, let him see. He crouched down near one, picked it up, turned it slightly, then set it back exactly where it was. "Survey markers," he said. "Yeah." He stood up, looked toward the fence line. "Where'd they come from?" I pointed. "Over there." We walked it together. Slow. Measured. When we reached the spot, he stopped and looked down at the wire. Bent just enough. Clean. Intentional. He ran his hand along the post, then stepped back and scanned the ground. Boot prints. Faint, but there. 2 sets. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said. "Let's see the footage." We went back inside. I set the laptop on the table, pulled up the clip, and hit play. No commentary, no explanation, just let it run. The 2 figures, the fence, the step over, the markers, the equipment, every second clean, undeniable. Tom leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the screen. He watched the entire clip, didn't interrupt, didn't rewind. When it ended, he sat back. Quiet. "That's your fence?" he asked. "Yeah." "That your land past it?" "Yeah." Another pause. Then he nodded. "All right." That was it. No reaction. No judgment. Just acknowledgement. "What about the gate?" he asked. I closed the laptop. "Still there." "Let's go take a look." We drove back out together. This time, I didn't stop short. I pulled right up to the gate and cut the engine. The guards were still there. Same 2. Same stance. But now there was something else in the air. They saw the cruiser, and that changed things. Tom stepped out first, walked straight up to the gate like he'd done it 100 times before. "Morning," he said. The radio guard straightened. "Sheriff." "Who installed this?" Tom asked. The guard hesitated. "HOA directive, sir." "Which HOA?" "Sage Hollow Estates." Tom nodded. Then he looked at the chain, the lock, the posts, everything about it. Then he turned to me. "You got your paperwork?" he asked. I reached into the truck, grabbed the folder, and handed it over. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he turned back to the guards. "You got anything that says you can restrict this road?" he asked. Radio man shifted. "We've been instructed that this is HOA managed access." "I didn't ask what you were told," Tom said, calm. "I asked if you've got documentation." A beat. Then, "No, sir." Tom nodded once. Then he opened the folder. Slow, careful, pulled out the deed, ran his thumb along the edge like he was feeling for something that wouldn't lie. Then he started reading. Right there. In front of them. No rush. No shortcuts. Just line by line. The air went quiet. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to back off. Because this part mattered. This was where things stopped being opinions and started being facts. Tom flipped the first page, then the second. Then he paused, went back, read something again, longer this time. Then he looked up. Not at me. At the road. At the gate. At the line that had been drawn where it didn't belong. He closed the folder halfway, still holding his place. "Where's your HOA president?" he asked. The guard glanced back toward the ridge. "She's on site," he said. "I can call—" "No," Tom said. "I'll wait." And that's when I realized something. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because whatever was in that deed, it hadn't just answered the question. It had changed it. Tom leaned against the post, one hand resting on the folder, eyes steady on the road ahead. Not rushing, not reacting, just waiting. Like a man who knew the next few minutes were going to matter. And somewhere up that road, Diane Keller was about to find out exactly what she'd built her case on, and whether it was going to hold. I stood beside the truck, arms loose at my sides, watching the same stretch of ground I'd driven 100 times without thinking. Now it meant something different. Now it was evidence. Now it was a line someone had tried to move. And the man standing next to me was about to decide whether that line stayed or snapped back exactly where it belonged. The sound of tires on gravel came from beyond the ridge. Slow. Controlled. Diane Keller's SUV appeared first, cresting the rise like it had somewhere important to be, but not in a hurry to get there. She pulled up just inside the gate, stepped out, and took in the scene in one clean sweep. The cruiser. The open deed. Me. Then the guards. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm, but tighter than before. Sheriff Hale didn't answer right away. He flipped one more page in the deed, then closed it halfway, thumb marking the spot. "You tell me," he said. Diane walked closer, heels steady on the gravel. "There seems to be some confusion about access jurisdiction," she replied. "We're currently working through—" "Yeah," Tom cut in. "You said that." She paused. Not long, just enough to register that he wasn't following her lead. "This road," she continued, shifting tone slightly, "has been incorporated into Sage Hollow's operational access framework. Residents rely on—" "Do they own it?" Tom asked. "Direct. Simple. No room to maneuver." Diane's eyes flicked to the deed in his hand, then back to his face. "That's part of the review process," she said. Tom nodded slowly. Then he turned the folder around and held it out, just enough for her to see the page. "This isn't under review," he said. "This is recorded." She didn't step forward, didn't take the document. But she looked, and I saw it. That moment. That crack. Small. Almost nothing. But it was there. Tom tapped the page once. "Private ingress and egress easement," he read aloud. "Registered. Filed. Tied directly to Mercer property. That road doesn't belong to your HOA." Silence. The guards shifted behind her. Not much. Just enough. Diane straightened slightly. Composed again. "Sheriff," she said with respect, Development expansions often require adjustments. Not without filings, Tom said. Not without signatures. And definitely not by putting up a gate and calling it jurisdiction. Her jaw tightened. Temporary control measures are sometimes necessary during transition. Transition to what? He asked. No answer. Because there wasn't one that worked. Tom stepped closer to the gate, ran his hand along the chain, then looked back at her. You've got people blocking access to a legally documented road, he said. You've got survey markers placed beyond a private fence line without permission. And I've got footage that shows how they got there. He let that hang. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Diane's eyes moved, just slightly, toward the pasture, toward where the markers stood. She knew. She knew exactly what he was talking about. That activity, she said carefully, may have been conducted by third-party contractors acting outside of... They crossed his fence, Tom said. At night. Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that builds weight. This situation, she said, is more complex than it appears. Tom nodded once. No, he said. It isn't. And then he did something simple. He closed the deed, fully, handed it back to me, then turned to the guards. Unlock it. The words landed hard, clear, final. Radio man hesitated, looked at Diane. She didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't give permission, because she didn't have it anymore. Unlock it, Tom repeated. The guard stepped forward, pulled the key from his pocket, and worked the lock. Metal clicked, chain loosened. The sound carried across the road like something breaking loose that had no business being held in the first place. He pulled the chain free, stepped back. Gate swung open. Slow, heavy, but open. Tom didn't move, didn't step through. He just stood there and looked at Diane. This stays open, he said, until you've got something that says otherwise. And if you put it back up without it... He let the rest of that sentence go unsaid. Didn't need to finish it. Diane held his gaze. For a second, I thought she might push, might argue, might try to reframe it again. But she didn't. Instead, she gave a small nod. Tight, controlled. We'll revisit the documentation, she said. Tom didn't respond, because there was nothing left to revisit. It had already been read, already been decided. I stepped forward, walked past the gate. Didn't rush, didn't look back. Just crossed the line that had never stopped belonging to me. On the other side, I paused, turned slightly, looked back at Diane. She was watching me now. Not like before, not confident, not certain. Just calculating. Like she was trying to understand where it went wrong, or maybe where it went next. Because this wasn't over. Not for her. Not for them. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a move, and now that move had been pushed back. Publicly. Legally, clearly. But something about the way she stood there told me this wasn't the end of it. Because people like Diane Keller don't walk away from something they've already sold, not without trying something else. Tom stepped back toward his cruiser, gave me a short nod. That deed, he said, keep it close. I will. He looked toward the pasture, then back at the gate. They knew what they were doing, he added. Yeah, I said. They did. He got in the car, started the engine, and pulled away the same way he arrived. No noise, no drama, just done. I stood there a moment longer, the open road stretching ahead of me again. Clear, right. but not finished, because behind me the problem was still standing there, and now it was thinking. I walked back to the truck, got in, and drove through the gate, this time without stopping, without asking, without anything between me and what had always been mine. But as I drove up toward the house, one thought stayed with me. They'd built all of that. The gate, the story, the pressure, knowing the deed existed, knowing the line couldn't be moved, which meant one thing. They weren't trying to win the truth. They were trying to replace it. And now that they'd failed once, the next move wasn't going to be quieter. It was going to be smarter. They didn't come back that night. Or the next. No drones. No inspectors. No guards stepping out of line. On the surface, it looked like they'd backed off. But that wasn't how this worked. People like Diane Keller didn't retreat. They recalibrated. I knew it the second the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring once more before picking up. Cole Mercer, I said. Mr. Mercer, this is Rachel Whitmore. Her voice was steady, professional, no hesitation. I've been reviewing some filings connected to Sage Hollow Estates, she continued. Your name came up. I didn't respond right away. Just listened. Because that name, Whitmore, I'd heard it before. Land disputes, county cases. She didn't call unless something was already moving. What kind of filings? I asked. A mix, she said. Boundary adjustments, access proposals, a few preliminary easement drafts. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. They filed those? I asked. Not finalized, she said, but they've been submitted for review. Quietly, there it was, the second layer. They're trying to legitimize it after the fact, I said. Exactly, she replied. Build pressure first, then make it look official once the narrative's in place. I walked to the table, pulled the brochure Eli gave me, and set it down next to the deed. They already sold access, I said. Buyers think that road belongs to them. I've seen similar structures before, Rachel said. They create expectation, then argue reliance. If enough people believe they have a right, it becomes harder to unwind. So they turn belief into leverage. Yes. I looked out the window toward the south pasture. They're not just pushing me, I said. They're building a system around it. Rachel paused. That's the right word, she said. System. I sat down slowly. What do they have on file? I asked. Preliminary boundary reinterpretations, she said. Environmental impact complaints. Requests for shared access classification. Nothing approved, but enough to create noise. Noise that becomes evidence, I said. Exactly. I nodded once. Everything lined up. The letters, the inspections, the drone footage. All of it wasn't random. It was coordinated. They're trying to make it look like your land is already part of a larger operational zone, Rachel continued. If they succeed, they don't have to take ownership. They just redefine access. I leaned back in the chair. They don't need to own it, I said. They just need to control it. Yes. Silence settled for a moment. Not empty, focused. What do you need from me? She asked. I looked down at the notebook. The logs, the footage, the timeline. Everything, I said. Every clip, every notice, every time they crossed the line. Good, she said, because that's exactly what we'll use. We? You're not the only one they've tried this on, she replied. That caught my attention. What do you mean? There are at least 2 internal complaints from Sage Hollow residents, she said. Buyers who were promised access routes that don't legally exist. I sat forward. They're turning on her. Not yet, Rachel said, but they're asking questions. That was the shift. Not external pressure, internal doubt. That changes things, I said. It gives us leverage, she corrected. I nodded. What's the next step? We build a case, she said. Not emotional, not reactive. Structured. We prove trespass. We prove misrepresentation. And we prove intent. I glanced toward the pasture again, toward the flags still standing where they shouldn't be. I've got footage of them crossing the fence, I said. I'll need it, she replied. You'll have it. Good. A pause. Then her voice dropped just slightly. Cole, she said, they're going to escalate again. I know, and it won't be as obvious next time. That's fine, I said. I don't need obvious. Another pause. Short. Measured. All right, she said. Send me everything. I'll start building the filing structure. And Cole. Yeah? Don't confront them directly again. I looked at the deed, then at the brochure, then at the notebook filled with facts they couldn't rewrite. I wasn't planning to, I said. Good. She hung up. I sat there for a second, letting everything settle into place, because now it was clear. They weren't just trying to take the road. They were trying to build a version of reality where it had never been mine. And they were doing it piece by piece, paper by paper, claim by claim. But now I had something they didn't expect: structure, documentation, and someone who knew how to turn both into law. I stood up, walked to the shelf, and pulled out a second binder. Clean, empty. I set it on the table next to the first, opened it, and started organizing. Section 1, Notices. Section 2, Surveillance. Section 3, Trespass. Section 4, Filed Claims. Every page labeled, every entry precise. Because this wasn't a fight you win by reacting. This was one you win by outlasting, outdocumenting, outthinking. By the time the sun dipped below the ridge, I had everything laid out in a way that couldn't be ignored. Not by a judge, not by a county office, not by anyone who had to put their name next to a decision. I closed the binder, set it next to the deed, and for the first time since that gate went up, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building, because whatever system they thought they had, it wasn't ready for mine. And the next time they made a move, it wouldn't be me stepping into their narrative. It would be them stepping into mine. The only question left now was, how far were they willing to go before it all came apart? I got my answer 3 days later. Not from Diane, not from the guards, from the county clerk's office. Rachel called just after noon. They filed again, she said. Same angle? I asked. No, she replied. Stronger. I leaned back in the chair, already knowing what that meant. They're not testing anymore, I said. They're committing. Yeah, she said. They submitted a formal access claim tied to community reliance. There it was, the move Eli had warned about. They're using the buyers, I said. Yes, Rachel confirmed. Statements, purchase agreements, projected access guarantees. They're arguing that removing that road now would cause financial harm to residents. I nodded slowly. They're turning a lie into a dependency. Exactly. I looked at the binder on the table. Every entry clean. Every moment recorded. They're going to push this into court, I said. Rachel didn't hesitate. They already have. Silence. Short. Focused. All right, I said. Then we stop waiting. That's what I wanted to hear. I stood up, walked to the shelf, and pulled down the second binder. Set it next to the first. Opened both. Everything lined up. Clean, clear, undeniable. Send me everything, she said. You'll have it in 10 minutes. Good, she replied. Because once we file back, we control the narrative. I hung up. Didn't waste time. I transferred every file, every clip, every timestamp, every notice, organized, labeled, structured. Then I sent it. No gaps, no holes, no chance for them to twist it. By that evening, Rachel had filed. Not a response, a counter, trespass, fraudulent representation, intentional misfiling of access rights, and the one that mattered most, misrepresentation of property control for financial gain. I didn't need her to explain what that meant. I already knew. They weren't just overreaching anymore. They were exposed. The next morning, everything shifted. Not quietly, not slowly, all at once. First came the calls. 2 of them. Residents from Sage Hollow. Different voices. Same question. Is it true that road isn't part of the HOA? I didn't answer directly. Didn't need to. I'd suggest you ask your board, I said. Then I hung up. Second came the email, forwarded from Rachel. Internal HOA communication. Leaked. Diane's name all over it. Language careful, controlled, but clear. We must maintain unified messaging regarding access continuity. Do not engage in independent verification. Refer all concerns to HOA Legal. I read it once. Then again. They were holding the line. Even now. Even with everything starting to crack. By noon, the 3rd piece hit. Rachel called again. They responded, she said. That was fast. They're trying to contain it. What did they say? Denied everything, she replied. Claimed misunderstanding. Framed it as temporary access confusion. I almost smiled. They're walking it back. Not far enough, she said. I stood up and walked outside, looked toward the south, toward the ridge. They can't walk it back, I said. Not after selling it. That's the problem, Rachel said, and it's about to become their biggest one. How? Because we're not just arguing ownership anymore, she said. We're proving they knew they didn't have it. That was the difference. Mistake versus intent. And we had proof of intent. The footage, the filings, the brochure, the timing. They built the case themselves, I said. Yes, Rachel replied, and now we're going to use it. By late afternoon, the final piece fell into place. Court date set, not months out, weeks, expedited, because once financial misrepresentation enters the record, things move faster. I hung up and stood there for a second, just looking at the land, still quiet, still unchanged. Except now, it wasn't just mine to defend. It was evidence. Everything about it. Every fence, every road, every line they tried to move. And somewhere out there, Diane Keller was realizing the same thing. This wasn't a pressure game anymore. This was exposure. And exposure doesn't get managed. It gets judged. That evening, I drove back down to the gate. It was still open, chain hanging loose, guards still there, but different now, less certain, less steady. They watched me pull up, but they didn't stop me, didn't speak, didn't even try. Because they knew. Whatever authority they thought they had, it wasn't holding anymore. I stepped out of the truck and walked up to the gate. Ran my hand along the metal again, same as before. But it felt different now, not like a boundary, like a mistake. I looked past it, toward Sage Hollow, toward the houses built on promises that were already falling apart. And I realized something simple. They hadn't just tried to take my land. They'd tied their entire development to it. And now that thread was unraveling, fast. I turned back to the truck, got in, started the engine, because the next time this got decided, it wouldn't be out here. It would be in a courtroom. And everything they built, Every lie, every move, every assumption was about to be laid out in a place where it couldn't be rewritten. The only question now was, how hard would the fall be when it finally came down? It didn't happen all at once. It never does. Courtrooms don't deal in explosions. They deal in sequence, piece by piece, fact by fact, until there's nothing left to argue. The morning of the hearing, I didn't rush. Didn't rehearse anything. Didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already written. In the deed. In the filings. In the footage they never thought I'd have. Rachel met me outside the courthouse steps. Same calm voice. Same steady eyes. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded once. Always was. Inside it moved fast. Faster than I expected, because there wasn't much to slow it down. They tried. Diane's attorney stood up first, spoke about community reliance, about development pressure, about how the road had become functionally integrated into Sage Hollow's infrastructure. It sounded clean, structured, almost convincing. Until Rachel stood. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue emotion. She just started laying it out. The deed, original filing, county record, clear, unbroken ownership. Then the footage, frame by frame, fence, trespass, markers placed beyond a boundary that had never been theirs. Then the brochure, promises made, access sold, money tied to something they didn't own. And finally, the filings. Their filings. Dates, timelines, the order everything happened in. Not confusion, not overlap, strategy. They built pressure first, then tried to legalize it after. Rachel didn't say it like an accusation. She said it like a sequence. And sequences don't lie. The room went quiet. Not tense, not dramatic, just settled. Because once everything lines up, there's nowhere left to go. The judge didn't take long. Didn't need to. Access control without legal standing, she said. Trespass confirmed. Misrepresentation substantiated. 3 lines. Clean. Final. The gate is to be removed immediately, she continued. All HOA claims over the disputed road are suspended pending further review. Financial damages and investigation referrals will proceed accordingly. The gavel didn't echo. It didn't need to. The decision had already landed. I didn't look at Diane right away. Didn't need to. I already knew what that moment felt like. Not loud, not explosive, just collapse. Everything she built, every assumption, every layer, coming apart because it was never real to begin with. Outside, the air felt the same. No change in the land, no shift in the wind, just the absence of something that shouldn't have been there. I drove back without stopping. Didn't check my phone. Didn't take any calls. Just followed the road the same way I always had. When I reached the gate, it was already half down. Chain gone. One post unbolted. The guards were gone too. No uniforms, no authority. Just an empty space where something temporary had tried to become permanent. I stepped out of the truck and walked up to it. Ran my hand along the metal one last time. Cold now. Lifeless. No claim left in it. A county crew truck pulled up behind me. 2 men stepped out, tools in hand. Didn't ask questions. Didn't explain. Just started taking it apart. Piece by piece. The same way it had been built. Only this time, there was no confusion about who had the right. I stepped back and watched. Not because I needed to, but because it mattered. Seeing it come down. Seeing the line return to what it always was. Unbroken. Untouched. By sunset, it was gone. No trace left but the holes where the posts had been driven in. Even those would settle in time. I got back in the truck and drove through. Slow. Not out of caution. Out of certainty. Because nothing was stopping me anymore. Not physically. Not legally. Not on paper. When I reached the ridge and I stopped, looked back once, the road stretched clean behind me. No gate. No guards. No sign telling me I didn't belong. Just land. The way it had always been. I sat there for a second longer, then shifted into gear and kept going. Because that was the thing about all of it. They tried to redraw a line that wasn't theirs, tried to make it look like it had always been that way. But out here, lines don't move just because someone says they do. They hold, and when they're challenged, they tell the truth. I pulled up to the house, killed the engine, and stepped out into the quiet. Same as before. Same land. Same boundaries. Only difference now. Everyone knew where they actually were, and they weren't moving again. Out here, I said under my breath, looking back toward the road. A fence don't just mark land. I paused. Let the word settle. It tells the truth about who it belongs to. And this time, there wasn't anyone left to argue otherwise.
Here's the thing this whole situation makes clear. Ownership isn't something you throw once and forget. It's something you protect patiently and consistently, especially when others start to blur the lines. Cole didn't win by raising his voice or pushing harder than the test version. He won because he kept record, trusted the process, and let the truth speak in the right place at the right time. There's a quiet kind of strength in that, standing your ground without turning it into a fight, letting fate do the heavy lifting. Because at the end of the day, land isn't just dirt, it's responsibility, history, and the line you're willing to hunt when it matters. Now I'm curious about you. If you found yourself in court booth, would you stand back and build your case, or conference is head on? Go ahead and comment 0 for walk away or 1 for staying your ground. I read every single one, and if stories like this about real people, real pressure, and quiet resilience means something to you, take a second to subscribe. There's more coming, and you won't want to miss the next one.